Hi, and welcome to this series on piano pedaling. So in Piano Foundation Formula, we discussed an overview of the piano to really understand how our instrument functions as a whole. So now in this series, we will explore one of the most personal and fluid aspects that a pianist works with on the instrument, which is our pedaling. So pedaling is an essential skill for any proficient pianist. It is often underutilized and undertaught, but it can open a world of possibility on the instrument. It is one of our most personal aspects of playing the piano. It changes from piece to piece between different genres and composers, and also between different pianos and even the space that you play them in. Now, even if all of these variables were the same, there would still be many differences between the way two different performers pedal the exact same piece of music. So I considered many ways of sharing this focus topic series. In private lessons, learning pedaling is really an experience of learning through ongoing guidance and observation in a variety of musical contexts. So in that way, pedaling becomes something that gradually becomes an intuitive and very personal aspect around the way that you play, and also an invaluable tool to expressing your own artistry and fully realizing what the composer was really aiming to produce when he or she wrote that piece of music. So for us to explore this topic, it was very important to me that we do so in a way that is not prescriptive, but rather in a way that offers you the tools and the knowledge that you can learn to creatively apply and adapt to the different music that you learn, and also the spaces that you play in and the pianos that you play. So in this series, we will approach this focus topic in the same way that we explored our foundational skills in Piano Foundation Formula, which is to isolate and become familiar with the tools that we have at our disposal and to develop independence by learning how and when we might want to apply them. We will discuss the function, the purpose, and the possibility of each of the pedals that you find today on the modern piano so that you can build these tools and apply them to your own music in a way that is entirely unique to you. So to fully understand what the pedals do and how to use them, we really need to understand first why anyone wanted them to be a part of the piano in the first place. So previous to the pianoforte, the popular keyboard instruments were both the harpsichord and the clavichord. In the harpsichord, strings were plucked with a quill to produce sound. In the case of the clavichord, there were brass blades or tangents below the strings to strike and produce the sound. Now, the mechanisms of both of these instruments allowed for that sharp clarity that we are so often aiming to reflect when we are performing early music, but there was also much less tone produced compared to what you hear on a modern grand piano today. There was very little sonority, and if you've ever had a chance to play a harpsichord, for example, you'll notice right away that there is little to no sustain, eliminating everything that we talked about in Foundation Formula about sound decay and resonance and what you learn so much about in your piano lessons. When Bartolomeo Cristofori first developed the pianoforte, for the first time, instead of quills or metal blades, now there were leather-covered hammers instead, striking the strings to produce tone. So not only did this produce a bigger and more resonant sound to begin with, but the construction of the instrument would continue to evolve to be able to stand up to this new hammer action. So as the pianoforte continued to develop, the strings needed to be made stronger and thicker, and the structure of the instrument also needed to become more robust to support this fuller sound. So we lost the clarity of the harpsichord with this added resonance, but we were given a new wealth of overtones and sonority that had never been explored before. The name pianoforte was given to reflect the wide range of volume and quality of tone that the instrument could produce. So there was this new rich sonority at the musician's disposal. This wide range and possibility of sound is a large part of what made the pianoforte so popular. And this growing popularity also meant that these instruments were now going into a wide variety of spaces, including smaller spaces and people's homes. So piano builders realized the importance of being able to actively and selectively control the resonance of this new instrument. This exploration of the growing range of sound, the tone quality, the color, volume, character is all where pedaling came from. So the three pedals that we use on the modern piano today that we will discuss in this series really developed and evolved over hundreds of years to the three that we use today. And today on the modern piano, we have our three pedals, which are the damper pedal, the sostenuto, and the una corda. So we will begin with the damper pedal. Now, a sustain pedal is typically found on grand pianos today and is the most commonly used. When engaged, the dampers are all lifted together, allowing each string to vibrate freely as standing waves. So the primary use of the pedal is to connect notes together that would otherwise not be possible, resulting in a continuous sound. However, we will discuss in this series the many ways that this pedal can be used artistically in phrasing, dynamics, and character, as well as how our use might change depending on which composer we are performing. To discuss the primary pedal, the damper pedal, let's first review the mechanics of creating a sound on a piano. Now, each note on the piano has a certain sound or resonance. This sound is a result of the length and thickness of the string and also the degree of tension to which each string is stretched inside the instrument. Now, the length, thickness, and tension of each string is measured according to the amount of energy needed to make it move up and down at a fundamental frequency or vibrate to what's called a standing wave. Now, standing waves are named as such because they prevent pitches from traveling from one end of the string to the other to fade away, instead forcing them to stand on the string and continue on that pitch before they either fade away or something is activated, like the damper in the case of our instrument, to stop the sound. Now, the strings vibrate at their fundamental frequency to create a standing wave against the soundboard. Now, made of wood, the soundboard allows for the strings' vibrations to travel into the air for our ears to hear and enjoy. Now, as the piano developed, builders knew they wanted to selectively control the dampening of sound, but you may be surprised to know that this dampening was not first done with our feet, and in fact, not even with our lower body for that matter. The very first damper activating mechanism was actually done by hand with what are called hand stops. So the performer could raise the dampers from either the treble or the bass areas of the keyboard, but they had to use their hands to do so. So this created an obvious challenge to have the hands occupied with controlling both the dampers and the keys, so this was quickly made obsolete. So as hand stops were discontinued, next knee levers were introduced in the late 1700s. Now, the knee levers were connected to specific damper groups of the keyboard, allowing the performer to choose specific ranges of the keyboard to control the groups of dampers selectively. This divided damper mechanism with the option to control only certain regions of dampers was quite popular, and many believe that this selective dampening was what led to the invention of the sostenuto pedal, which we'll get to soon. So by the late 18th century, these levers began to appear as foot pedals in England, first with pedals that activated the treble and bass individually, and eventually the damper pedal that controls the entire set of dampers as we use today. Now, the second most commonly used pedal following the damper pedal is the una corda, or the soft pedal. Now, although it is used less than the damper pedal, it was actually the first pedal mechanism invented out of the three by the same person to perfect the piano, Bartolomeo Cristofori, around 1726 to be able to change the tone quality and make it a little bit more muted. The una corda, which translates to one string, was developed in response to the growing sonority produced by the piano that we discussed earlier. So with the growing popularity of pianos and pianos becoming part of more homes, builders not only wanted to control the quality of the tone, but also the volume of the sound produced. At first, builders used what's called a celeste, which was a thin strip of leather in between the hammers and the strings. This feature not only helped to mute the sound, but it also changed the quality to take some of the edge off of the sound, making more of a gentle tone. Now, side note, this celeste mechanism is no longer used in grand pianos, but it is still used on some upright pianos, which we will discuss further as we move on to our third and final pedal next. So instead of the celeste, piano builders opted for the una corda mechanism that is most like the one used today in our modern grand piano. When depressing the left una corda pedal, the entire keyboard and hammers shift to the right to strike less of the strings. Now, there is a large difference between this pedal as it was invented compared to what it achieves on modern pianos. Older models allowed performers to choose between striking either 2 or 1 of the 3 strings. Early pianists could choose between striking all 3 of the strings, which would say tre corda, or 2 strings, due corda, or of course 1 string, una corda. So today with the modern piano, we depress the soft pedal when we see una corda for 1 string, and then when we see tre corda, which is for 3 strings, we know to release. Now, although at first explorations it may be easy to think that the primary purpose of the pedals is to create more or less sound, actually the main use of the pedals really came from a desire to change the tone quality as well as the dynamic level. Now lastly, on modern upright pianos, this pedal is actually most commonly what's called a half blow pedal instead. When engaged, the hammers actually move closer to the strings, and the smaller distance results in the reduced volume. Now lastly, we'll talk about the middle pedal on a grand piano, which is the sostenuto pedal. Now the sostenuto pedal on a grand piano is the least commonly used, and we will discuss why it is often even omitted from piano construction. When engaged, the sostenuto pedal prevents the dampening only of the particular notes that are being held down at the time that you press the pedal, thereby sustaining one or a group of specific notes. French in origin, many believe that this mechanism was born from the selective damper mechanisms that led to the invention of our single damper pedal that we discussed earlier. So now that the damper pedal would control the full range of dampers, this would still allow selective control of dampers as performers had enjoyed in the past. Now, the sostenuto pedal first debuted at Expo 1844 in Paris, and the perfected version was patented by Albert Steinway in 1874. Steinway began to include this mechanism on their pianos in America, but other countries around the world were less interested in the invention. In fact, many European pianos did not adopt the middle sostenuto pedal on their grands, and even Steinway's Hamburg pianos, grand pianos, do not include these. Now, in most modern upright pianos, the middle pedal is not a sostenuto pedal at all. It is actually what's called a practice pedal, or celeste, as we discussed previously, which allows a layer of felt to block the action of the hammer striking the strings. And that result is still the sound being reduced in volume and the tone being much more muted than the mechanism that the una corda pedal can allow for. So I hope with this introduction, I hope that you not only have some good insight to what the 3 pedals are on your piano, but also a better understanding of what they are for and how they were meant to affect our music. Now in this series, as we go forward, we are going to cover exact techniques and guidelines around why and how we use each of them, and the wide range of color, range, and character that they can bring out for you in your music. So I'll look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.